Okay, council, this is Committee of the Whole for November 18th, 2019. I see we have quorum, call it to order. After viewing, first we have to adopt the agenda, that the agenda for the November 18th, 2019 regular meeting of committee be adopted as circulated. After looking at the agenda, is there indeed any changes to be made? Not seeing any. All those in favor? All those opposed? Amended as circulated. Thank you.
Pecuniary interest is next.
Oh yeah, pecuniary interest, yes. After viewing the agenda, is there any counselor that needs to declare a pecuniary interest or a nature thereof? Not seeing none, I ask the clerk to please note. Now, department reports. Motion put forward by Councillor Wink. September 2019 financial reports, 2019 0128 corporate services. The committee received report number 2019-0128 corporate services for information. Any discussion on this report? Oh, Councilor Wayne.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I'm going to beat Councilor Core on this one. So the transit appendix. Got a smile on you, so that's good. There's a couple of grants. One's a provincial grant and one's a regional grant. I know this is as of September 30th report, but have we received those grants at this point in time, or when can we expect them?
And what staff member should,
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we are in contact with the region, the director of Recreation, RCW, and we're going to be discussing it this week where the regional grant is. And with regards to the provincial grant, we're just waiting on the timing of when that money is going to be coming forth.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, the annual submission, we had reports to do. They've been submitted now, and it's normally a 3 to 4 week lead time that they deposit the money. So I think this is about week 3.
It should be, yeah.
Then so it should be any time now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor?
It's fine, thanks.
So one question I have, is this the same grant that we're operating on for the 5 years? This is the 100,000, is this the grant?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the grant that we're talking about.
Okay,
It looks like we will be receiving about 70,000 for the first year, but then next year we could receive 130,000. Over the 5-year period, it will be 500,000. The reason being is that we were not as quick as what we wanted to be with the second bus.
okay. And one other question. So even though we're guaranteed the grant for 5 years, we have to reapply every year?
No.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't reapply. We just need to submit reports on how we're doing, where we're at,
Okay.
did we meet our goals, things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions on this report? Oh, Councilor Wayne.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Service, there was an item regarding under road station, Town Square to Port Robinson, and it's now completed, but it was 189% over budget. Can you explain that that variance?
Can you just tell, what is your reference number?
Oh,
Like
sorry.
the first column?
It's under Transportation Services. It would be page 6 of 10. RD 09-17.
This one here. 0917. Oh, RD, sorry. This one. It was a carry forward.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, this was a 2017 project. From the best of my knowledge, this was the design work that was carried out for the reconstruction of Station Street, which hasn't happened yet. And also the design for the water main work. If you recall, there was a previous report that was done in September of last year, I believe, 2018. September of 2018.
Yeah, we
which
weren't
would
here.
have identified additional, I'm losing my track of time here, would have identified additional engineering costs that were a result of some redesign work for a roundabout at Station Street. I don't have the exact, that was the project prior to my involvement with this particular project, so I would have to get back to you on the details of that, but my best of my knowledge, that's for design work, additional design work that was required as part of the Station Street reconstruction project.
If you wouldn't mind getting back to us then,
Sure,
that'd be great.
definitely
Thank
do
you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. The committee received report number 2019-128, Corporate Services for Information. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrandt, Effingham Street Road Safety, 2019-0122, Public Works. The committee received report number 2019-0122 and recommend to council that council approve the implementation of a uniform 50-kilometer-per-hour speed limit on Effingham Street between Regional Road 20 and Regional Road 69, which is by Henry of Pelham, I believe. Any comments, questions on this report? Ms. Council Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So first off, I just wanted to know, how did this report come to be? Like, it's an older study that was supposed to be done and is just now getting done, and the cost of this report and such. Who can speak to that? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Associated Engineering was retained in early 2019 to conduct this safety review of Effingham Street. The request basically came from requests from residents with the safety concerns on that section of road. There was also fatality that was under investigation, and from those, based on the feedback that we received from the public, as well as recent accidents along that stretch, the study was commissioned to complete a road safety corridor for Effingham Street, right from Highway 20 to Pelham Street.
So further to that, so when you're talking about the concerns of residents, I'm gonna guess those are the residents that are just up from Henry of Pelham, that stretch right there? Is it, because it can't be the whole stretch of people that were complaining.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Most of the residents, that's where most of the harder issues are with this section of road, is between Ollie Street and Pelham Street on Effingham.
Okay, so further to that then, I have a concern that dropping the speed limit to 50 in an area in which people frequently like to drive for leisure is likely to increase disregard for speed limits. In short, this will not be well respected by the traveling public. I would like the Director of Public Works to review this report and bring back a report that identifies any portions in which 60 could be maintained because the road is sufficiently straight and or sight lines are good enough. In other words, the straightaways, because there are straightaways still, and they're at 60, and the curvy parts obviously have to be reduced, and they're at 50. I believe the current speed limits are appropriate. What is needed is adequate enforcement, and I would like council or staff to request the Niagara Regional Police to devote some resources to enforcement of current speed limits and to see if that has any impact before we make this proposed change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We can definitely request Niagara Region to provide more enforcement on the section of road. I would like to draw the councillor, all the councillors, to the fact that there are deficiencies with respect to this road. The current 60-kilometer-per-hour posted speed limits do provide, in essence, deficiencies at a lot of the side intersecting streets with respect to sight lines. So those are, we did the study, so those are in fact the case, regardless of how fast people are traveling on that section of road. The posted speed limit dictates sight lines requirements, and 5 intersections along that section of Effingham in the 60-kilometer-hour zones are deficient based on the posted speed limit alone. So that's one issue that would need to be, if it was council's decision to not accept the recommendations in this report and keep the 60 kilometer per hour speed limit, staff can look at what other options could be put in place to calm traffic, to try to control speeds, but there still will be sightline issues at some of those intersections unless there are geometric improvements made to the roadway itself at those intersections to improve sightline distances, or possibly some other measures that we could look at with respect to warning traffic about the intersecting side streets.
So for instance, if you look at Tyson Effingham, which no doubt is a bad intersection, it very, very much is, because you're coming up a hill and it's kind of, you're kind of blind to the fact that the road's there at the top. So I guess your thinking is that reducing it by 10 kilometers an hour will just, there's still gonna be accidents. It's not gonna reduce the number of accidents per se, but the hit won't be as hard. Is that the thinking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in essence, the public are gonna drive at the speeds they choose to drive at and what they feel comfortable in driving. Simply the reduction from a 60 kilometer per hour posted speed limit to a 50 kilometer posted speed limit means that now those sightline distances are less. You actually are in compliance with respect to what's in place right now. So it's a liability issue for sure that you're limiting.
You're on it every day too. Do you have
I
an
know.
opinion?
Oh, I got some things to say too.
Do you?
believe me, yeah.
Go for it. Go for it.
I guess I'll take the floor now. I know that this was a consultant report that brought forward this. I was going to ask the director to look up when the last consultant report was done, because I know, I would say within 10 years, clock flies, it could easily be 15 years, but it was that consultant that came up, until that company did that study, the Effingham was a raceway. It had whatever the speed limit, I think it was 60 all the way along, and then we hired this consultant. He came in with the 50 kilometer zones, and that's when every curve on Effingham Street has a yellow warning sign that either says 40 or the one bound by the old quarry, where the last bend before you go down to Henry of Pelham, that one I believe is 30. So each bend is already looked after by these yellow warning signs. The only stretches that I'm aware of that are 60 kilometers an hour are indeed the straight road that's going across the end of a grapery, or on the other side of Roland, where it is a little stretch there that, again, there's one house there, it's nice and straight. So as a resident, and I don't live on the road, but today, when I was traveling the road, there was 2 residents out in the yard. I stopped and had an unofficial discussion with them, and they were, well, I won't say what they said, but they weren't in favor of reducing it down to 50. As the director has pointed out, people will drive what they want to drive. And the fact that those are 60 ones that are the zones that are 60 are on the straight part of the roads, and all the curves have already got the yellow green or the yellow signs telling everybody to slow down. And believe me, if they were watching those signs and obeying those signs, they wouldn't be going into the middle of a field or unfortunately crossing the center line and getting hit by ongoing traffic. It's just unfortunate that road is, by some people's thinking, shaped like a raceway, and they treat it as such. Again, as the council pointed out, we can put as many signs on there as we want. The one time this summer that the Niagara Regional did enforcement by Henry of Pelham, it ended up making big news, because in an hour or some silly amount of time, they had 35 or 40 speeders. So there's no doubt that instead of the signage, it would be nice if we could get enforcement there, but that is not our expertise, unfortunately. So myself, I realize as a consultant report, now we have this report ahead of us, in front of us, and if we don't follow up on the recommendations that this consultant has said that we should go down to 50, then I wouldn't want to know what the liability is next time someone has an accident and they look at this council and say, well, you had a recommendation, a consulting report, you didn't do it. I'll ask either the CAO or the Director of Public Works to report on that. Would you be interested in commenting on that?
Most certainly not.
Okay. So then the best this council can do is probably to ask take this report back to Public Works, and where you see deficiencies, if you wanted to give us a cost estimate to fix those deficiencies and leave it at 60, then at least we would have a cost comparison of fix the road so we're good with the 60, or if you don't want to spend this on the road, then it's probably go to the consultant report. Would that be something we could do there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so just to answer a couple of your questions, the last report was done back in 2007. I believe at that time the speed limits were 70 kilometers an hour and 60 kilometers an hour. So the way the speed zones are broken right now, it's Highway 20 to Kilman Road is 60 kilometers an hour, and this is going to the north. Kilman Road to 16 Road is 50 kilometers an hour, so that's in essence through the valley there in Effingham. From 16 Road to Wessel, it again is a straighter stretch, and it's 60 kilometers an hour. And then from Wessel Road to Pelham Street's 50 kilometers. So it goes from 60 to 50 to 60 to 50. It used to be 70 to 60, 70 to 60. It was reduced. And there were some items to be identified for the deficiencies to be cleaned up. With respect to the different speed zones that we have, the signing that's required to warn of upcoming hazards is different. So one of the thoughts here was that if you go to one consistent speed limit for the entire section road, then you can have more consistent signage. Even when you go from a 60 to a 50, the signs become bigger. The requirements, the spacing becomes more. And so if it's council's decision that we remain with the 60 kilometers per hour in those areas, then we would have to do some improvements with respect to signage. We can definitely come back, staff can come back with a report on that and what those costs would be. One of the things that would not change would be the sightline restrictions that we have at several of the intersections in that 60 kilometer an hour zone. So we can definitely look at what some costs would be with respect to creating some better geometrics at those intersections for those locations. We can do that. But that's basically the intent of the report, was there was inconsistencies along the section of road, and to make it one consistent speed at 50 kilometers an hour would help us be more consistent with our signage and bring us into compliance with sightline issues.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Hall.
Yeah, through Mr. Ray. Further to that, you know the signs that are, they've got the solar panel on the top, and they can be used like as a flashing sign, they're solar powered. Is it possible to put something like that, like a flashing sign that's solar powered, that's there, a permanent fix? So when people are coming up the hill, right, and there's people crossing Tice, they're pulling out in front of the people coming up the hill, that they're aware that there's, that there's an intersection, blind intersection, or hidden intersection, or something like that, I believe it's called. Something like that, is that possible, and how much would a sign like that cost?
So, to you, Mr. Mayor, I was kind of prepared that some of these questions would come up tonight. So we have looked into it. We did talk with the consultant, and if the request from council was to stick with the 60 kilometers an hour, there are some mitigating measures that we could put in place. And that's what they recommended, was to have some portable signage, lighting signage warning of intersecting side streets at those critical intersections. The cost for those we're estimating to be somewhere around $2,500 to $3,000 per sign.
You said portable? They would, you
They
said
would be,
removing
well,
them?
they'd be positioned, sorry, they're not portable. They would be positioned, sorry if I said portable, they'd be positioned off the edge of the roadway. They would be permanent, but, and we estimate the cost for those are approximately around $3,000 per sign. So that's something that we can definitely look at some of those higher impact intersections where we have a number of collisions and we have issues that we could install signage or some type of warning devices at those locations.
Yeah, even regardless of what council decides to do with whether it's 50 or 60, I would be in favor of putting that in there regardless of the speed, because there's people coming up the hill, trying to get enough speed to go up, it's a significant hill, and then you've got people crossing Tice and they're not coming to a full stop, they look one way and they pull out, so regardless of the speed, there's still gonna be potential for an accident, and will continue to be accidents just because it's at the top of the hill. So investing in that would be, I think, a smart investment.
Okay. I believe the fire chief has a,
And if I could chime in, I totally support the 50 all the way through. In an enforcement perspective, 50 is way easier to enforce if it's one long stretch and it's one speed zone. We talk to the police when you go from 50 to 60 to 70 to 40 or whatever, it's hard to know what zone you're in, and for them to write citations, if they have one stretch, they know it's 50, and that's a bad section. No matter where you are in Effingham, there's no straight section on Effingham, I'm sorry. It's all up and down, it's around, it's twists, it's S-bend. I've been in fatalities on that road, from Highway 20 to Tice to Metler to everywhere on that whole road. And people speed on it, it's isolated, that, you know, so in enforcement perspective,
yep,
in a fire perspective, as far as MVCs, is that people die from impacts from energy. And the more energy is generated in an impact, the likelihood of further more injury. When two cars collide at 50, which we get a lot on out in front of, you know, Sobeys and liquor store, there's very little damage to people. It's mostly property damage, and there is some minor injuries. But when we get into the outer zones where we're getting in the 70s and 80s and that type of thing, that's where our fatalities. So we're in the valley. When you're going down Sailor's Hill, dangerous. You're coming up Sailor's Hill, you hit Tice, danger. You hit Metler, the blind on both sides of Metler are blind. You go down further to Roland and keep working your way out, and then north of Wessel, when you get into that S turn, and I totally agree on the flashing lights. Those early warning devices on those extreme, I've been to, I can't tell you how many fatalities have been on that, on those double S bends there. The motorcycles love them. They just, like, they come in herds, and they race through there to see, they have competition to see how fast they can go through there.
Yeah.
So if we were to mark them all 50, put the flashing lights at the S-bends, give the police better ability to ticket, because it's easier to detect a car going over 50. I think it's public safety. I think a 50, regardless of the complaints, 50 straight through is definitely what the report suggests. I totally support it.
well, chief, I hate listening to common sense. No, actually, the way you explain that, I guess the one thing and like all counselors, to go back and do another report, and then basically we're gonna end up with the same thing anyway. Perhaps we should go with, if council, of course, agrees, go with Councillor Hahn's suggestion, and with the chief. Let's make the road safer. It's up to you guys. I guess I've been convinced. Go down to 50, put some flashing lights on. Is there a flashing light when you come up from Henry or Pelham? Is that not a flashing light there before you go in by the old quarry, or is it just a signage there? Maybe it's just signage, okay.
It's a reflective.
Oh, is that what it is?
It's a reflective sign.
Okay.
But it's still we've indicated, we just installed, or I shouldn't say we, Public Works just installed a flashing light at the end of Overholt, coming
Okay.
into the valley, North Pelham.
Yep.
That's a result of cars going straight into a resident's home. It's landed in his front yard a number of times.
Yeah.
Took out his swing set, like, you know, it's,
Yeah.
so.
Dangerous.
But since that flashing light's been put up, we haven't had any complaints.
Okay. So perhaps then, council, we should direct the Public Works to look into the positioning of lights, and who wants to word that, or any advice on that, Madam Clerk?
Well, it would be preferred to have a motion for direction to direct the Public Works to investigate positioning of flashing light indicators along Effingham Street.
And Counselor, are you, I guess I've been converted, or are you converted to the solid 50, or would you like to still?
I would like everyone to do some homework, and then we come back to this, and that is drive from 20 in Effingham to Tice at 50. And just see what you think as you're driving 50 there.
Yeah.
And that perfectly straight patch.
Well, I already know what I do, and it's not 50.
That's exactly where.
But, well, whatever, like I say, it's up to your council.
Clearly I'm outvoted, so go for it and just make it safe with some flashing signs.
Yeah, I like that, that's an excellent idea. Counselor Hildebrand?
I agree. I'm not about to take the liability of not going with the consultant's report. I mean, that I don't think would be prudent on my behalf. And no matter how little I like driving at 50,
Yes.
and even cyclists don't drive 50 down that road.
You'll be passing us as we drive on, as you drive home, you'll be passed by
Yeah.
bicycle.
I know the director of public works had a solution for that too, but anyway, I think 50 is the speed limit. Go with
I would think we're gonna accept this report, I'm sorry.
Get an amendment to the report.
Okay.
To ask, and that the director be requested to report back on the location of flashing lights.
Okay,
Does that
so,
sound reasonable, Mr. CEO?
Absolutely, it does.
no. Okay, so we'll have this,
Put it in
we're
the
gonna
budget.
add onto this report that the council is going to,
Staff be directed to report, I'm just doing this as I'm typing it, back on potential locations and cost of installing flashing light warnings along Effingham.
at appropriate spots, whatever, okay.
So that would be part of the appropriate locations and the cost implications.
Okay. Council, happy with that? Yep.
That report doesn't address the fact that we're going down to 50 for the entire
Well,
stretch.
this
It's in
actually,
addition, so this is proposed as an amendment. It needs a mover. So you vote on that amendment, then you vote on this recommendation as amended. So it's adding a paragraph for staff
Okay.
direction.
All right.
okay,
And I think it's also important too, though, that it's not just visible, whatever you do at the top of Effingham Hill, at Tice Lookout, that it's not just visible for the drivers on Effingham. It's, they're hitting something, and it's the cars they're hitting are the ones coming out of Tice that are not looking both ways and pulling out. So it's those vehicles on Tice need to have some signage or have some, there has to be some sort of safety. It's not a solution, because it's not gonna be a solution if that road's still there. So, some sort of, I guess, effort that we can put for those drivers coming out of Tice. They don't come to a full stop and they don't look both ways.
Flashing stop signs.
He's nodding his head, yeah. Yeah, nobody, it's just a rolling stop and they go through.
Early warning hidden intersection signs that Public Works has, there's a number of
Yeah.
things that
So
we have.
something like that,
So,
yeah.
Flashing stop signs.
I'm sorry?
Flashing stop.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, exactly, flashing stop signs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on that amendment, that the clerk just read, we'll vote on that first. All those in favor?
So just
Oh,
through you to accommodate Councillor Hahn's request, I've just
Okay.
added in as well as the intersection of Tice Road and Effingham.
Okay. And so perhaps we should say in there, not only just the flashing cautionary lights, but actually the installation of flashing stop lights, or stop signs.
Well, I have it as flashing light warnings.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure the director will be able to propose some
Yep.
options for council to consider.
Okay,
So that's the amendment being voted on right now, and I have Councillor Hahn as the mover.
Sure.
okay. So on the amendment, all those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? And now on the motion, I'll read that again. The committee received report number 2019-0122 and recommend to council that council approve the implementation of a uniform 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on Effingham Street between Regional Road 20 and Regional Road 69. And then,
The amendment.
and with the amendment on top of that. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Fire Chief. Okay. Rock University Center for Health and Wellbeing Partnership. Satellite Site Proposal, Meridian Community Center, 2019-0127, Recreation. The committee received report number 2019-0127 and recommend to council that Brock Center for Health and Wellbeing Partnership Satellite Site Proposal, Meridian Community Center be approved, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the proposed memorandum of understanding with Brock University. Discussion on this motion. Counselor, let's go to Counselor Trophy first.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So what would the cost be for the equipment for this program?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, somewhere around $7,000.
And that would cover-
Including,
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. Counselor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, further to that, what is the equipment? Are we talking about like stationary bikes and actual equipment, or bouncy balls?
yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a whole list of equipment. Mainly it's slam balls and it's the weights, and we have a couple of portable rowing machines. It's a circuit that we are proposing.
So I think it's a great program, and I'm in favor of it. Let me put that out first off. But the only thing I shouldn't say but. However, I think that if the taxpayers are going to spend $7,000 versus Brock not paying $7,000 or chipping in for that, which is odd, perhaps they should be considering paying for a portion of it. But if not, if taxpayers of Pelham are paying for it, then they should be able to use it and it not just sit there and stored in a closet when this program's not happening. It should be available to those taxpayers that help pay for it. So if we can come up with some sort of programming as opposed to a rowing machine or what have you sitting in a closet, that's available for folks to use when they're at the MCC. Maybe that's for some small fee. I don't know. You have to work that out, but I just think it should be available for everybody.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is proposed that, we start off with this program, and then we'll go from there, and I can see this growing into something more. And honestly, the issue right now is we have daytime hours that would be available, evening hours. It's difficult to fit in more activities, but I'm sure that once we get this started, it will grow into something additional.
So your time frame on that is in like
This,
second quarter
through
or?
you, Mr. Mayor, this will start January 4th, I believe it is.
Okay.
So
And then-
it will be from January till June, and then we'll reassess it at that time. I can see already, because word's gotten out, that we will double up in classes.
So again, to my point though, the availability for other folks to use it that aren't registered for this particular course, for them to be able to access this equipment, I think is important. So we're not gonna wait a full year before they can access it. You'll start working on some sort of programming or some sort of situation where it's not stored in a closet, because that's silly to have equipment stored in a closet when people can use it.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we will look at other opportunities as we go along. We already have opportunities for other equipment that we charge, people come in, they use it, and there's a nominal fee, so I'm sure that something could be worked in.
So by second quarter kind of thing?
That'll be the goal.
I'm gonna hold
Second
you to that,
quarter.
right? Okay,
Yes.
second quarter, thank you.
So, before you sit down, Madam Director, so the idea here then is that we put up the $7,000 for the equipment, and they're supplying like this equipment is not just for anybody to go in and use, it's gonna be, what's the word, supervised by Brock students, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there will be one coordinator that is a full-time staff at for Brock, that will be overseeing and supervising the kinesiology students that will be working with the program.
Excellent, excellent. And do we know how many they will have there at any given time, or is that still to be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're looking at, there could be up to 3
Okay.
total, depending how it goes, and if we go into the second hour, then it would be additional.
Excellent. Good, thank you. Any other question? Councillor
Yeah,
Hiddleston?
through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say that Brock runs many other programs just like this. My grandson, who's a very young hockey player, they run an elite hockey training program, and they do that with kinesiology students, and it's super. And the number of students they have out there is amazing, because they're all trying to get the number of hours in they need for their program.
Excellent.
And so I can see the MCC being a host center for those kind of programs as well, and they'll take up the daytime hours, which is the neat part of it.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'll call it to the vote. I won't bother reading. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councillor Corr, summarize update 2019-0129, Recreation. The committee received report number 2019-0129 and recommend to council that the Meridian Community Center continue to offer summer ice. Comments or questions on this report? Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. No disrespect to anybody, but the information we got is very limited. Even the spreadsheet that was accompanied to that doesn't match the financials on the MCC. It was dated April 19th. I looked at the numbers, they don't match. To the Director of Public Works, could you explain to me, when the ice is working and we have one machine, how many people does it take to run? Like, do we have to have 24-hour service, or do we have to have the same amount of people that we have in the wintertime? And when we're running 2 ices, do they look after both equipment? And I'm sorry, I'm not in the back there. I don't know if it's 2 different machines or one machine that runs 2 ice pads.
To you, Mr. Mayor, I do have some of those answers, but I think I'll defer to my colleague, Vicky, Director of Recreation and Wellness.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we would have the same amount of staff on during the winter months as the summer months. We have 1 operator, one facility attendant, and a facility support staff, as well as the reception staff. We do not have 2, you don't need 2 additional staffing when you have 2 pads, because you are only maintaining a pad at a time. So it's the same staff operating 2 pads.
But in the summer, it's the same staff running 1 pad.
So what you would have is 1 pad without ice, and you would have 1 pad with ice.
With the same amount of employees when we had 2. So,
Correct.
so it's the same cost, no matter if we run 1 ice pad or 2 ice pads with labor. When I talk
Labor,
about labor,
correct.
and the information here is, what does it cost us to have people there dollar-wise? I know it's said here in someone's report, you know, calculate the hydro was 29,000, and I'm going to defer that to my colleague, Mr. Hildebrand. Would you think that would be the right amount of energy in those 3 months?
To you, Mr. Corr, I can't answer that question. We're in the midst of making other substantial changes to the cost of our hydro, so I can't tell you. We can tell you what we spent this last year per month. I think the Director of Finance can give you those numbers.
Yeah, but
And they-
so where, through you, Mr. Mayor, where did he get 29,000? That's, where did we pull that number out of?
For you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. There's they analyzed how much it costs to run the actual refrigeration equipment. If the refrigeration equipment was not being ran, then that $29,000 would not be spent on top of it. And that's for the period between April and the beginning of August.
But the report's at the end of August, and there's a
So-
lot of different, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay. So what the report said is we started to make ice on the second pad, August the 8th. But we continued to rent ice on the original pad. So what the report says is up to the end of, from April the 1st to, no, I'm sorry, from June until August, there's a, just a minute. So April, May, June, and July have been calculated at 29,000. August was not calculated in that because we started to make 2 ice pads the first week of August. So within that period of time, it would have cost us an additional $29,000 to maintain that ice, to have the ice. We brought in $65,475 during that period of time. The August, while we were making the second pad of ice, so now you have 2 pads of ice, that was not calculated because that's when we have to have 2 pads of ice to prepare for the fall season. And in the time period from April until the end of August, that is where the last schedule is between the programs of $14,000 programs brought in, 84,000 were ice rentals, a total of $98,000 was brought in from April until the end of August.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, the $29,295, is that hydro, is that labor, is that a combination of both?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because there is not additional labor involved, because we would have the operator, facilities attendant, and the facility support person, whether there's 1 pad of ice, whether there's a pad of ice and a pad of no ice. So you're accommodating lacrosse and other programs, special events. That the labor portion would remain the same. The energy cost, which is including anything to do with the refrigeration plant, the Enbridge, that is where you get your 29,000. So the extra cost of running the refrigeration, the hot water to resurface, the water was $29,000.
Okay, so, and again, this is, I'm just a simple businessman. So if there's no ice, we're still gonna pay technicians to sit in the back room and schedule from 8 in the morning till 11 at night. If there's no ice, because that's what you just told me.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if there's no ice pads at all, we're still gonna pay these people.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these people don't only operate the ice, they're also looking after the pad, they're looking after the 2 gyms, they're setting up for meetings, they're taking down things for meetings. Those 3 people are busy throughout the whole facility. They're also cleaning the facility as well.
Through you.
So it's nonstop.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add, they also take care of the pools as well. So they do all the chemicals and all the stuff with regards to the pool. But you're right, the staffing doesn't change as far as I've seen.
I just, and the other thing that bothers me is that we talk about other communities. You know, are we subsidizing other communities to come in our community? And what is the difference between the rental of winter ice and summer ice? Is there a 20% increase, 30% increase? I hope there is an increase because it does cost more money to have ice in the summertime than in the wintertime.
Just happen to have my fees and charges with me, sorry. We analyzed the ice rates, both summer and winter last year, being that it was, we had one full year. And these rates are based on across the region as well. Let me see here. So summer ice rates are actually a little lower than the winter ice rates. The prime time ice rate for 2019 in the winter is 202.75, and the prime time for summer ice is 175, and that's the going rate across the region.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me, but I can't accept this report. I think we need the staff to go back and make more sense to it. Again, I want to know how much labor it's going to cost, or if we decide not to, how much we're saving. So it's just a little complicated here with all these numbers. And again, the chart at the end with the summer ice doesn't match what the financial director has on her NCC report. So.
Councilor Chilton.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I am a member of the user group for the MCC, and last year, obviously, was the first year that the summer ice was kept in on one pad. And I think that was one of the main concerns that council had last year, keeping it in, is the cost. Now, to answer Mr. Corr's question, the cost does remain the same for the labor, because those 3 people are there whether the ice is in or not. They are taking care of the pools, the 2 gyms, the Accuracy room, the Kinsman's room, and et cetera, and even the day camps are there as well. With the user groups, on the user groups you have the Pelham Junior B Hockey, Pelham Minor Hockey, the AAA Admirals, and the Niagara Figure Skating Club. Every one of them is expressing interest to rent the ice for this summer again. Going into the second season, last year it showed a profit. I think this year it'll show even more of a profit because the word is out that the one pad will remain in. There's also, you have to consider the cost of removing it and the cost to put it back in. It takes 12 days, approximately 12 to 15 days to get the ice back in as well. So there is a cost to that. The reason why the ice does go back in so early in August is because all the tryouts start just prior to school, before September, and then your seasons for the minor hockey would start in September. Last year, it was, are we subsidizing other communities? To answer that question, there are people using it from outside. You had the Thorold Junior Bs that rented it for a good chunk, and you had the Welland Junior B team that rented it for a good chunk, so they can continue on with their non-official tryouts in July and et cetera. And during the day, I believe even the kids from the summer camp used it a few days a week, part of their activities. Yeah, and then it's also rented. Now, the thing you're going to see is, what I believe is, that your prime time doesn't get used as much, because during the summer, people are home during the day, so they're taking the cheaper time during the day, so that, you should know that as well. But all in all, I think it is beneficial for the town to keep one pad in, because like the same amount of employees will still be there.
Yeah. So if I can just one last thing, and then Director will hear from you again. So basically, you're saying, just around numbers, 30,000 for hydro, labor stays the same, and then and the income is 94,000. So we're making approximately 70,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to point out, while Councillor Chilton was talking, I was doing some figuring there. I still heard what you said. So, the actual, financial report that you were speaking of, so the monthly from April until August, it's 117,634 total in the arena revenues, but that also includes 18,829 would be for the home show, the art festival, and lacrosse. So the numbers are pretty close, I believe, as well.
I'm through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just saying, as an accountant or looking at this report, he would get confused and he wouldn't understand what the value or if we're saving or we're not saving. That's all. I'm not disagreeing about having the ice in or not having it. It's just the report could be more detailed and more better presented through a Excel program. So.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, one last comment. And the other thing you should realize, last year there was one major old timers hockey tournament booked through April, which the ice normally would have been out. And this year they're booked again, correct? And possibly two more that they were talking about. That brought in teams from all over. Like there was 40 teams at the very first one, I believe. Vicky, 40?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are other things that generate revenue. Might not be for the ice that they're renting, but for the bar upstairs.
Yeah,
So that's another thing you have to look at the whole picture.
yeah, great, thank you for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as well, just wondering if there's been any consideration to which pad, you probably know which one you want to keep the ice in, but with regards to doing any summer concerts or anything like that, we would want the larger Sippeter arena for concerts, yes? So you're keeping the ice in, which one?
Doodle Day.
Doodle Day, okay, so we could still do concerts or something, whatever we want to do, okay.
Any other comments? And I guess I just one comment, Director. And so before, it used to be mandatory that you had to have the ice out for X number of days to let the frost out of the ground and what have you. That doesn't have to be done in this facility? Because I know in the St. Catharines Arena in Niagara Falls, we used to get summer ice, and they always had it out, I believe, for the month of May, and our summer ice started in June. Can you comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's actually amazing with the new technology. They started to take out the ice on the Friday and the end of March, and the home show started to move in on the Tuesday.
Wow.
It was incredible, and everything was clean and dry.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
It's putting it back in, it takes about 10 days.
okay. So this thing about having to take the ice out to get the coldness out of the ground, that doesn't apply. It's just the way they build them now.
I think Councillor,
Yep, Councillor Bob?
I think the technology that they're running over there is, the ground underneath is heated. So there is a difference
Wow.
in the
Wow.
old technology versus the new and how arenas operate.
Great, thank you for that. Okay. Okay, any other questions on this motion? If not, so that the Meridian, that committee received report number 2019-0-0129 and recommend to council that the Meridian Community Center continue to offer summer ice. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Only.
Yeah. Motion put forward by Council Trophy, Summerfest 2019 final report. Excuse me. The committee received report number 2019-0121 and recommend that council declare Pelham Summerfest 2020, July 16th to 19th, 2020, a municipally significant event, and that any surplus funds realized in 2019 be carried forward, and that council maintain the same level of funding for 2020, which in brackets is $15,000. Any comments or questions on this motion? Not seeing any, we'll call the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Oop. Wow, this is the one we wanted, ladies and gentlemen. Motion put forward by Councillor Stewart that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for December 2nd, 2019, following council. All those in favor? What? All those opposed?
Okay, we're just gonna go back to the other meeting. to go
Oh,
close.
well, yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Hey, Bob.
This is committee, we still have.
This is committee,
Right, we,
so now we gotta go back.